Hey everyone, we're back looking at Battle for Zendikar. We're going to do the black cards this time, and black looks to be very good. I think it's going to be one of the heavily drafted colors in this set, mainly because the removal is pretty good. But let's go ahead and start. Look at the cards. Again, we're going to start with the Eldrazi at common. The first one being Mindraker. So it already passes the Hill Giant test, being a 3/3 for 4 is decent, but we want our Hill Giants to do a little more than that. So when this one enters the battlefield, you can process a card from your opponent's graveyard. If you do, each opponent discards a card. I like just the idea. This shouldn't be too hard to turn on. Black has a pretty nice curve with its commons, having 1, 2, and 3 drops that can ingest and set up cards like Mindraker. Getting a 3/3 that automatically makes your opponent discard is pretty good. We have Deadbridge Shaman in Magic Origins, which was a 3/1. It did cost 1 less mana, but it died a lot easier, and it had to die for your opponent to discard. This one has 3 toughness and lives through a lot more, but makes your opponent discard immediately, which can be pretty good at any point in the game. Incidental discard on your creatures is usually pretty good. So this guy passes the test. I think it's going to be not something that people are going to fight over, but something that'll fill out your black deck quite well. Moved into that, we see Dominator Drone, which, by the way, curves from 3 to 4 into our last guy. Dominator Drone's a 3-drop with good stats. A 3/2 is already good. It has ingest, so it sets up our Mindraker. And finally, if Dominator Drone enters the battlefield and you already control a colorless creature, each opponent loses 2 life. Now notice these are each opponent effects, so they're double as good in Two-Headed Giant if you plan on playing that for pre-release. But this guy strikes me as very good, even for a common. 3 mana 3/2 would be fine if it had nothing else. Ingest makes it a lot more synergistic with the rest of the black cards, and then the ability to just drain your opponent for 2 as soon as it comes in is pretty good, and the 2-drop slot curves into this perfectly, which is coming up very shortly. Dominator Drone, I think, is good in multiples, so grab them if you can. Take a better card over it if you can, but if you're in black and you need to fill up that 3-drop slot, this is the perfect card for you at common. Here we get a good one, Complete Disregard. 3 mana, instant, exile target creature with power 3 or less. This card is going to dominate the early game. There are a lot of things in the late game this isn't going to touch, so it's probably best to use it at the most advantageous point in the first couple of turns, or in the first 3 to 4 turns. I put Tightening Coils here because between Tightening Coils and Complete Disregard, you can exile almost anything. Tightening Coils will drop its power low enough that you can target it with Complete Disregard, which is relevant, I think, because there are creatures that are going to have 7, 8, 9 power, unless they're dropping Ulamog or Desolation Twin or something like that. This combo will take care of it. It's kind of just a cute thing I threw in there, but one that I think you should keep in mind if you're having trouble getting rid of some of the big guys. Drone, the 2-drop, a perfect 2-drop, curves right into our 3 and 4 that we've already seen. Nothing too special, just a 2/2 for 2, but that's already good. And this one ingests when it hits, so if it hits, you're setting up your 4-drop to discard a card, or you're setting up some of your other processors. So already black has a good curve from 2 to 3 to 4, and its creatures size up favorably against the creatures we've already seen in white and blue. So I imagine this format's going to end up with a lot of creature trade-in and a lot of equal power on both sides of the field until you get to the late game, where it's going to be dominated by who's got what big creatures and how they interact with each other. Moving on, we've got this kind of a weird card, Silent Skimmer. It's a 4-drop, which I think is more than I want to spend on this card, but it's an 0/4 flyer. It doesn't have Defender, it's just 0 power. Flying, when it attacks, your opponent loses 2 life. So if it declares an attack, your opponent's automatically down 2 life. But it has 0 power, so they can just not block it. They can multi-block it with a lot of creatures to kill it. A bunch of flyers. The reason I don't like this is because it's overcosted. It is a common, so it kind of makes sense, but once your opponent gets down a big flyer, and every color has access to a big flyer here. Once your opponent's got that down, Silent Skimmer's just not doing very much. It is a clock, and it is an unpreventable 2 damage every turn. Or I should say 2 life loss. So I'm not going to write it out, but I don't think I'll play this en masse. Maybe as a curve filler, maybe if I need a blocker. If there were a reliable way to give it vigilance, I'd be a little more excited. But right now, I don't think the upside is quite there. I wish, because I like kind of the design of the card, I wish it had been moved up to uncommon and maybe drain for 3 life, or cost 1 more and drain for 3 life. Something a little more relevant than a 4-drop that starts doing 2 per turn after starting on turn 5. Here I've got a card that I think is not going to be very good, but a lot of people are kind of happy with it. And I'm not going to say it's completely bad, but we've got Sludge Crawler. It's a 1-drop. It is an ingest creature, so it is the 1-drop that you kind of want for black, and I don't think it's completely useless, but it's a shade basically. 2 mana, it gets +1/+1. I put Bella Lizards here because the effects are very similar. Bella Lizards is obviously worse because Bella's Lizard only gets +1/+0, whereas Sludge Crawler is getting a toughness boost. But people like these cards a lot more than they should. If you're spending 4 mana, and I understand it's good to have a mana sink, but it takes 4 mana to make this guy just a 3/3, and I don't think a 3/3 is worth 4 mana every single turn, or pretty much at any point. Like, you want to be adding creatures to the board, not using your mana to make your little creatures trade with other things. Sometimes that's useful, but in the case of Bella Lizards, that extra power just... it can get in a little bit of extra damage, and it can trade with a creature, but normally it's just bad, and I think that's going to be the case with Sludge Crawler. The only difference being that it seems like there are good 1-drops in each color, and if you play Sludge Crawler on turn 1 and your opponent follows up with their 1-drop, Sludge Crawler can get through it with its pump, but after that point, I don't think it's going to be very relevant, and it's actually... it seems like the type of card that would be okay in the late game if you have a lot of mana, but I don't think so. Considering how huge the creatures in the late game are in this set, I don't think Sludge Crawler is going to stand up to that very well, and I don't think you're going to want to invest a lot of mana in it. So my opinion is stay away from it unless you need the 1-drop Ingester, which black can definitely use, but don't get too carried away thinking that it's going to win you games or that it's a lot better than it looks, because I don't really think it is. Of course, I could be wrong about that, so we will see. Swarm Surge is here, and I should have put Inspire Charge next to it because they're very similar effects, but this is a different niche for a similar effect. This one is Sorcery Speed, 3 mana. Creatures you control get +2/+0. Your colorless creatures gain first strike for the turn. Now, if you're very, if the composition of your deck is mostly devoid creatures or other colorless creatures, then Swarm Surge seems very good. And I imagine this card is going to be pretty good in this format. The reason Inspired Charge doesn't always do what it should is because you only get +1 toughness, and those creatures that get the boost often still just die in combat. Here you don't get any toughness, but First Strike makes this a lot harder for your opponents to get any sort of benefit out of their blocks, or they just take a bunch of damage. So even though this is not instant speed, it does cost 1 less, and it fits into a lot of decks. And if you play it on curve, you could go turn 1 Sludge Crawler into turn 2 2-drop, and then follow up with Swarm Surge, and you're either really far ahead on life, or your opponent just has to throw a bunch of guys in front, and they're likely going to die to it. So I think I like Swarm Surge, but I'll have to see how it plays out. These wide pumps like this usually don't pan out the way you want them to all the time, but this one with the added First Strike seems like it could be quite good. Here's something I'm pretty excited about. Grave Birthing. So 3 mana instant, devoid. Target opponent exiles a card from his or her graveyard. You put a 1/1 Eldrazi Scion onto the battlefield, and you draw a card. So this is quite a bit of card advantage. It doesn't do anything particularly powerful, but it does a lot for one card. First off, it draws you a card, so it's automatically replacing itself. Second off, it's setting up your processors by exiling a card from your opponent's graveyard. They get to pick the exiled card, but I don't think that should be too relevant most of the time. They do have to have a card in their graveyard for you to use this. So if they don't, you can't actually cast the card, but that shouldn't be too much of a problem. Basically, you also get a creature out of it, and probably use it more for ramp than anything else, but this could give you an instant speed blocker. This could give you an extra mana on your following turn. This could get rid of a problematic card in your opponent's graveyard. It could draw you into something. It does a lot for one card. And like I said, it's nothing super powerful, but I think in the span of a game, this will add up quite a bit, and you'll notice how useful it is. So I recommend picking this fairly high. Maybe not over some better creature, but definitely fit it into the deck if you can. I like the effect quite a bit. Alright, Voracious Null. So moving away from the Devoid cards, we get a zombie here, a 2/2 for 3. So it's a little bit behind, but its effect for 2 mana, you sack a creature, put 2 counters on this guy. You can only use it at sorcery speed, so you can't block and sack, or do some of the tricks you can with Nantuko Husk or Bloodthrone Vampire. So it's not quite them, but it's a permanent +2/+2 in the form of counters, and there are quite a few things you want to sack. For instance, Eldrazi Scions. I like that in a certain board state, if you have creatures on the field, you can play this turn 3, and then on the following turn, if you follow up with a 4th land, you can basically make this guy a 6/6. That's kind of putting all your eggs in one basket, but this is I think this is a very strong card, and it can get quite out of hand if you don't have an answer for it, or if you're playing it and your opponent doesn't have an answer for it. But try to take care of it as soon as it hits the board. Otherwise, this is going to be the type of card you're going to slowly fall behind. I'm going to try it out. I don't like that it's behind curve as soon as you play it, but the output potential over a couple of turns is quite big. And if you're not using your extra Eldrazi Scions to pull ahead in the mana race, then having all these sacrifice outlets is quite good. And this is just one of many sacrifice outlets in black, so keep this card in mind. It's pretty decent common. And follow up with another good common, Klastria Nightwatch. This is an ally. Black has a couple allies. Again, the allies in black are not as good as the ones in white. I think white definitely has the best allies, white and red, but black does have a couple that you can fit into certain decks. In this case, you get a 4/5 for 5, which is pretty good. Not amazing, but also not really behind curve. It's kind of what you want to be paying 5 mana for. And in this case, if you gain life, this creature gains flying for the turn. So it can be a 4/5 flyer for 5, which is quite good. And above most of the other flyers in the set. And this being at common lets it spar with some of the rare flyers. This you can also, there are a lot of ways to gain life instant speed, so you can give this flying on your opponent's turn to block their flyers, and you can also just use it to get through damage. So black pairs quite nicely with white in this set, white having the better ways to gain life, or at least a good number of ways to gain life, maybe not the better. And the best cards, again, maybe not the best, but some of the best cards to take advantage of you consistently gaining life. Myers Malice, card I don't think I would play very often, so it's basically 4 mana Mind Rot, or if you alternatively play 6 mana, you get to Mind Rot your opponent plus Awaken 3. This is kind of the opposite of the, I forget the blue card that we just talked about, but the Draw 2, Awaken 4. It's kind of strange that you get an Awaken 3 on this one, but an Awaken 4 on the blue one. It's a little intriguing to think about. 6 mana, 3/3 creature that makes your opponent discard 2. That's definitely a playable card, But I don't like Mind Rot effects, and this card I really only like if I'm paying the full 6 for it. And by the time we get to 6, my opponent might just be empty in hand. So this card's a little tricky. It can be good. Discard is sometimes good, but I don't love it, and I don't think it's going to make my deck quite often. Turcotte Assassin. I'm sorry, Turcotte Assassin. 3 mana, 2/3 ally. Decent stats for a 2/3. Spars pretty well with a lot of the 3/2s that we've already seen for 3 mana. If you gain life, it gains Death Touch. So pretty good blocker for almost anything if you have a way to instant speed your life gain. Sometimes you can gain life in your first main phase, or you can sorcery speed your life gain, and then your opponent's very reluctant to block a Death Toucher. So you can get in damage with this pretty reliably, but I think it's more of a defensive card in certain situations, as Death Touch lets you take out 10/10s without a problem. So very versatile card, but you do have to have life gain to make it pretty good. It would fit the curve if I have no other life gain and I would still play it, but I'd only really be excited to draw it if I had a way to turn its Death Touch on. Alright, Geyserfield Stalker. It's a 5 mana 3/2 with Menace. Landfall gives it +2/+2 for the turn. So if you can't trigger Landfall, it's just Boggart Brute. And 5 mana for Boggart Brute is not the same as 3 mana for Boggart Brute. However, Menace is a very strong ability on powerful creatures, and if you've got a 5/4 attacking in and it can only be blocked by 2 or more creatures, then this is probably going to trade for maybe 2 guys. So 2 for 1's your opponents. Not always. It is worth noting that Menace seems not as good in this set because a lot of the creatures do come with Eldrazi Scions, so you can kind of get around Menace by blocking, but you still need to trade off some creatures in order to kill this thing. If you're not using the landfall, though, this is really bad, and I can see this being cut sometimes. I need to be quite aggressive, and I need to have a way to know for a fact this is going to be swinging as a 5/4 in order for me to really want to play it. Calastria Healer. So we've got another ally, this one with Rally. 2 mana 1/2, so it doesn't quite block 2/2s very well. But it's one of those sit-back defensive cards. Now, its Rally basically drains your opponent, or each opponent. So good in 2-headed giant. I think this is an all-star in 2-headed giant if you can just get a bunch of these and drain your opponent without ever having to attack them. But for 1v1, this is just a decent 2-drop. If you have more allies in your deck and you can, push through Rally, then that adds quite a bit of a life swing. After 2 more allies, it's basically a Siege Rhino effect. Your opponent's lost 3 life and you've gained 3 life while adding to the board. So it benefits you having other allies, but you don't necessarily need them. Demon's Grasp. I think this is going to be a very high pick. 5 mana, target creature gets -5/-5 until end of turn. This is sorcery speed, not instant, and it is worth noting that after turn 5, if your opponent's curving out or you're curving out, you're going to see a lot of 6/6s and above, so this doesn't quite kill everything. It's not quite the same card as Lash of the Whip or Throttle or Flatten. I don't think it's nearly as good as any of those. I would rather take the 4/4 for less mana or instant speed than I would the 5/5 because they kill kind of the same things. But I don't think this is a negligible card either. It does kill quite a bit, and it just basically costs you your turn. So in black aggressive decks, you want these to get rid of big blockers or deal with creatures that are beating you down. But it's not always going to deal with the big 6/6s and above that are beating you down. So I can argue this being a first pickable common in a bad pack, but I don't think it's as good as some of these others. And we're going to see a better removal spell. Dutiful Return, card that I don't think anybody really wants. I don't really know what to say about Dutiful Return. It's the last time we saw it, I believe, was Theros, or sometime in Theros block. And no, it was also in Khan's block. Or it was a functional reprint or something like that, but it was never good. And most recently we've seen Macabre Waltz, which is just much better at 2 mana, getting back 2 cards and discarding 1 rather than 4 mana just to get 2 creatures back. This could be fine. There are a lot of enter the battlefield triggers, and there are a lot of value creatures, so maybe Dutiful Return, getting those back, is very good in an attrition-y match. But usually Dutiful Return is not going to make your deck, and you're usually not even going to pick it. You'll usually end up getting it either last card in the pack or right before it. So don't fight over your deck never needs it, and very rarely will ever want it. Bone Splinters. Now, this is a card that is first pickable, is absolutely going to get snatched up all the time. So if you're in black, you want this card. Unconditional removal at the cost of sacking a creature for 1 mana. It is sorcery speed, so you can't instant speed a Bone Splinters, but killing anything, killing your opponent's 10/10 or their 9/9 for 1 mana and an Eldrazi spawn seems very good. Also, if you're getting value off of the creature that you're sacking, then it just gets even better. But Bone Splinters is the real deal. Technically, it's card disadvantage because you're sacking something, but even in the worst case scenario, 1 mana to kill anything at the cost of sacking a creature is quite good, especially in a format where you've got extra 1/1s laying around. So don't let too many of these pass you by. I will be grabbing all of the Bone Splinters I see because I do not want to play against them. Fallen Up, Altar's Reap, another good sacrifice card, also with much, much better art this time. Not that I hated it before, but you cast it and sack a creature, and if it resolves, you draw 2 cards. Again, since there are value creatures and Eldrazi's that make Scions, this is basically pay 2 life, draw 2 cards in most situations. Every now and then you'll actually have to sack a real creature, which doesn't feel as good, but drawing 2 cards off of one of your creatures is quite nice. Especially it blanks your opponent's removal as well. If they're targeting something, if you got 2 mana open, you can just Altar's Reap it. All of these sack engines also make enchantment-based removal quite bad, since your opponent can lock down your thing and basically just give you a free target for your sacrifice engine. So Altar's Reap, good card. Don't go crazy on it. It's not quite as good as Bone Splinters, but it is very good use of extra creatures you have laying around. Transgress the Mind. So we're moving into uncommons now, and we've got a Devoid Sorcery. For 2 mana, target player reveals their hand. You choose a card with converted mana cost 3 or greater, and you exile that card. Now, this is what I want in a removal spell. I don't often play cards like Despise or Duress in Limited because I'm just 1 for 1 in, and sometimes I miss. Some of them are very conditional, but I like Transgress the Mind because nearly every deck is going to be playing something big that you want to get rid of, and if you exile it ahead of time, you don't have to ever worry about it. I also like that you don't necessarily have to play this on turn 2, because the cards you're taking out of your opponent's hands are the ones that they're not going to have down on turn 2 or 3. So you can save this for a turn where you could play a 2-drop creature and then Transgress the Mind or something like that to use your mana efficiently. You can also just run this out on turn 2 and take their best card and exile it. The exile is also quite good, since your processors want your opponent's cards exiled, and black has some good processors, so Transgress the Mind is quite good. I don't think you want too many of them, but having at least 1 or 2 seems pretty decent. Skitter Skin. This is an uncommon. 4 mana for a 4/3 is quite good, so it's a good attacker. We do have to keep in mind this cannot block. I'm usually very wary of creatures that say they can't block, because there are games where you just need to draw a blocker, and if you draw something like this, that line of text just lost you the game. Now, obviously, you don't want to be blocking with Skitter Skin, you want to be attacking, because for 2 mana, if you control another colorless creature, you can regenerate this. So this just gets to slam in for 4, and even though it has low toughness, if your opponent tries to trade with it, you regenerate it. That's a little conditional. You do have to have another colorless creature up, but I think this card is good enough that if you're trying to be aggressive and you're trying to curve out, you might want to drop one of these on turn 4. It's also the type of creature, usually with Regenerate, you want to be able to hold up mana plus regeneration mana to get the best use of it. But since Skitter Skin's not really blocking, I don't think you have to do that very much. Unless you know for a fact it's going to die when you play it, I suggest just run it down on turn 4 and starting to bang your opponent with it. It gets in for quite a bit of damage, and they're going to be reluctant to block if all they're doing is losing a creature in the exchange. Sick card here, Grip of Desolation. First off, the art is fantastic. Instant speed, devoid, exile target creature, and target land. So we've seen Spiteful Blow in Journey into Nyx. Same mana cost, destroy target creature and target land, sorcery speed. There are a few things in this set that are indestructible. Not too many. Ulamog comes to mind, and the White Rally rare card comes to mind. But Grip of Desolation gets around indestructible. It's also instant speed, whereas Spiteful Blow is sorcery. And I think Exile on a Land, well, we all know Exile on a Land is going to be much more relevant here than it was in Spiteful Blow. You can exile an Awoken Land, which is basically 6 mana, kill 2 creatures. You can exile a Man Land. You can exile one of the value lands your opponent might be able to use on their following turn. If your opponent's on Converge and they have one of their splash colors up, you can exile that and put them off of it. If they're struggling for a land, they maybe only have one white source in a white deck, you can get rid of that white source and put them off of it. So Grip of Desolation, definitely killing a creature, definitely killing a land, and potential to get more value out of it, really. 2 for 1 at its best, instant speed, pretty much everything you can ask in a 6 mana kill spell. Quite first pickable as well, so be very happy having that in my deck. Here we have another Life Matters card. 4 mana 3/3, so we get another Hill Giant, but this one gets a 1/1 counter whenever you gain life. If you can gain life multiple times in a turn, then you get multiple counters. This can get out of hand pretty quickly if you have a repeatable life gain engine. For instance, the white tapper that gains 1 life might be good alongside this creature if it's pushing him in the range of 4/4 and then 5/5 and 6/6. Also an ally here, worth noting, some of the other black allies gain you life when it enters the battlefield. So, for instance, we've already seen one. If you play that and then you follow Blood Bond Vampire, you gain a life, get a counter, and you just played a 4/4 for 4. So this strikes me as a very good card. If you have a couple ways, just 2 or 3, I would play it without ways to gain a lot of life, but if I had a couple ways to gain life, I'd be pretty happy playing it. Rising Miasma. This is a 4 mana sorcery. All creatures get -2/-2 for the turn. 7 mana to awaken. Now, I don't love it. The way this works is everything, if you pay 7, everything would get -2/-2, and then your land becomes a 3/3, so your land does not get the -2/-2, but really you're only making a 3/3. This isn't a very good board wipe at 4 mana. Your opponent's likely going to have things that aren't going to die to this, and it is a symmetrical effect, so it's going to affect you too. Unless you're walling up and you're playing this on turn 4, I don't think it's going to do that much. If you're aggressive and you're trying to get through, you're just going to kill your own creatures. And 7 mana is quite a lot for just Awaken 3. The Awaken, I feel like, needs to be a lot higher on this for this to be... I mean, the Awaken, the number of counters needs to be higher, not the cost. Or the cost less, but 7 seems like too much. I'm not excited about this card, but I guess it's good to always have it available if you're playing against an opponent that it wrecks. I'm thinking Eyeblight Massacre in Origins, which has the same mana cost, just double black instead. The one that gives -2/-2 to all non-elves. That card wrecks certain decks, but Rise of Miasma, I just don't see it right now. But I will be aware of it, and you should be as well. Alright, a 1 mana enchantment, a sacrifice outlet. This one is very good, I think, if you get it on turn 1. 2 mana, sack a creature, gain a life, and draw a card. So first off, this blanks all of your opponent's removal. If they ever try to remove something and if you got 2 mana open, you sack it, gain a life, and you get value off of it. You get life gain and you draw a card. If you have cards that care about you gaining life, you trigger them and you're still drawing a card. The cost isn't too high. This card seems very good. It seems like it could even be a rare compared to some of the other enchantments with similar effects that we've seen before. But this one comes down on turn 1. It doesn't cost a lot, and the activation is reasonable for what you get out of it. So I like this quite a bit. I would want value creatures to do this. You obviously don't want to be sacking your good creatures to be drawing cards and gaining life. It's also worth noting, we've already seen a lot of sack outlets. You can only put so many sacrifice engines in your deck. You need to choose the best ones and use them as efficiently as possible. If all of your cards are fighting over sacrificing different things, you're trying to put 2/2 on one creature and you're trying to draw cards with this and you're trying to gain life with something else, it's not going to work out. So pick which cards you want to be your sacrifice engines and go in on those. Don't pick too many of them. Here's a similar card to the ally we've already saw. Now this is an ally as well, a 1/1 for 2. This one doesn't actually have rally though. Whenever another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So the other creature we saw, the 1/2 for 2, was a rally card that had the same effect when an ally enters the battlefield. This one has the same effect when a creature you control dies. So if you're playing them alongside each other, every ally that enters the battlefield and then dies is netting you 2 life and losing your opponent 2 life. That's only for allies. The other creatures that aren't allies still get this guy's ability and lose you life. It makes trading with your opponent quite beneficial for you, as you can win the life game. This guy himself is unimpressive. He's just one of those cards that sits in the background and does his thing. But I think he's not something you should underestimate. The life gain over a span of a game with all the creatures that are dying and the sacrifices you're going to be making in black add up quite a bit. And the life gain for you triggers a lot of the other black abilities in this set. So keep in mind this card is available, but it isn't uncommon. Alright, and we get this bat that looks like a dragon. I was actually excited to see another drake in black and then figured out it was a bat. But whatever. We got a 3 mana, 2/1 flyer with Death Touch. Already very good in my opinion. I would pay 3 mana for a 2/1 Death Touch flyer without any. This one has the benefit of getting +1/+1 for a turn if you gain life. So it could be a 3/2 flyer, which is very good for 3 mana, and you can use this on offense or defense, and I love cards like that. Death Touch makes it tricky for your opponent, and oftentimes you'll get in more damage with this card because your opponent doesn't want to block it and lose a creature than you rightfully should if it didn't have Death Touch. So I think this card is justified at uncommon, and I'd be quite happy playing it. Hagure, Sharpshooter, 3 mana for a 2/2. For 5 mana, target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. So unless you're going really long or you have tons of Eldrazi Scions, you're really not activating this ability multiple times in a turn. So what you're doing with it is shooting down Eldrazi Scions, shooting down X1s, or trading up with your opponent's creatures so that, for instance, your 2/2s trade with their 3/3s. I don't think this is quite as good as it sounds, just because 5 mana is a lot for -1/-1. It's just a lot. This is an ally though, and other than that, I'm not excited about the card. I would probably sideboard it and then put it in my deck if I saw that it had a lot of targets that it actually kills rather than just reducing their power. 5 mana is quite a bit for an activated ability that just reduces by -1/-1. Carrier Thrall. Now, this is a good card. 2 mana, 2/1, so aggressively costed, fits the curve, attacks quite well. If it dies, you get a Eldrazi Scion. Very, very good card to sacrifice. Very similar to Turcotte Assassin, in that you can sacrifice the creature and then sacrifice the Scion. The same way with Turcotte Assassin, you can sacrifice Turcotte and then sacrifice the token you get off of it, and you basically get 2 sacks out of 1 creature. Think about the Voracious Thrall that we've already seen, or whatever its name was. The zombie that gets +2 counters when you sack a guy. If you play that on turn 3 and then follow up with Thrall, you can get 4 more counters up just this 1 card for 2 mana, and then 2 mana on your the other guy's activation. I think this is going to be a good contender. Also, if you're not using a lot of sacrifice outlets, you're just happy trading this guy most of the time. If you trade this for a 2/2, you get a benefit out of it and leaving behind another creature. So it works out quite well for you. And I think I would be happy taking as many of these as I see in a draft if I'm playing black. Alright, our black retreat is Retreat to Hagure. This one costs 3. The landfall gives us the option of either giving a creature +1/+1 and Death Touch, or gaining you life and losing 1 life. Now this is a life enabler that I like, because once you play it, you don't have to do anything else but hit your land drops. And then you're not wasting your mana on other cards to be gaining life. You're just incidentally gaining life, getting your life gain triggers, and your opponent's losing life in the process. Alternatively, you get the Death Touch clause, which the +1/+0 makes it very good on flyers. There aren't any black first strikers, but if you could give something first strike, Death Touch and first strike are a insane combination. And also it just makes your guy gonna trade with anything that blocks against it. So this seems like a very good engine. If you don't have a lot of cards that care about you gaining life, you can just use it to trade your guys. And if you do, you use it to gain life, and your opponent loses life. So I like it quite a bit. I think I'm going to play around with it a lot. Same with the other retreats. They're very flexible. They give you options, and they're like toned down versions of the sieges from Fate Reforged, except you don't have to pick one of the options consistently. You can switch between them. So I like the versatility in this card, and I think it's quite powerful for 3 mana. Alright, now we're moving into our rares, and we get our first one, Smothering Abomination. This is a double black and 2 for a 4/3. So it's the same as Skitter Skin, except this one can actually block. And it's also a flyer. So 4 mana for a 4/3 flyer is good. Means on turn 5 you get to start attacking the air for 4. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature. This is mandatory. You don't have the option. So if Smothering Abomination is the only creature you control, you have to sack it. Whenever you do sack a creature, you draw a card. Now, if you can reliably keep your creature engine going, and you can sack to this, then you're drawing lots and lots of cards, and you will pull ahead, assuming this thing stays alive. If you're playing a very controlling game against your opponent, this might not be the card you want, because they can just warp the field, so this is the only thing left on it. I think this card is good. It's a miserable top deck if you need it, if you need some sort of board state. If you play it into an empty board, all it's going to do is block for a turn, and then you lose it. But the upside here is very good. The benefit of drawing extra cards off of your unneeded scions and unneeded creatures is very good. Another one I'm quite excited about, another 3 mana 3/2. There are quite a bit of those in this format. This one says when it enters the battlefield, you process a card, and if you do, a target creature gets -3/-3 for the turn. So this is removal on a decently costed creature, assuming, of course, that you can reliably exile a card. Now, we've seen a common Ingester in the 1 and 2 drop, and we've also seen Transgress the Mind. So you can easily exile a card before turn 3, play this, kill your opponent's first relevant creature, and then start attacking. This card does exactly what I want a 3-drop to do, and it synergizes very well with the curve. I think it's an all-star, and I'd be happy to take it. Not quite amazing in the late game if your opponent's got big creatures out, but still relevant at any point in the game you draw it. And then one I'm very unexcited about, 7 mana for a 4/5 flyer, which is okay. If you just have no other way to close out a game, those are okay stats, but they're not good for 7 mana. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. Now, if you are all in on the life gain, then that ability can be quite good. It is worth noting, if you're playing a lot of life gain cards, you can probably survive until you get to a 7-drop. But this guy isn't so much of a game changer that I really want to make that my game plan. I think this is a passable rare most of the time. And I think games will be decided, and if not decided, someone's going to be on the back foot already by the time we get to the point where we can cast this card. I'm not excited about it. Maybe I'm undervaluing it, but I don't believe that I am. My recommendation, pass it for a better card. Like this one. Ruinous Path, 3 mana, double black, destroy a creature or planeswalker, 7 mana to awaken 4. So yeah, if you're playing against your opponent's Gideon or Kiora or Obnixilis, then you've got a way to destroy it here. But the odds of that being relevant aren't very likely. The more important part, sorcery speed, destroy any creature for 3 mana. Very good. Unconditional destroy. 7 mana is quite a bit again, but if for some reason you draw this in the late game, the awaken cost is not irrelevant. Killing your opponent's creature plus getting your own 4/4 is very good. And if, again, think about it this way, would you play a 7-drop creature, a 7 mana 4/4 that says when this creature enters the battlefield, destroy target creature? I know that's not exactly the same as Awaken, but that's how you need to evaluate Awaken cards, and that's something I would probably play. So Ruinous Path definitely checks off everything I wanted to do, and in that one game I'll play where my opponent has a Planeswalker, I will really wish I had Ruinous Path. Alright, bad rares. Painful Truths, 3 mana, sorcery, converge, draw X cards, lose X life, X is the number of colors spent to cast it. So first off, to get the maximum benefit, you have to pay 3 different colors. Black doesn't look like it has a lot of payoff to playing more than just 2 colors. So this seems like the type of card you would splash in a different color deck. You would splash black to play this. The maximum you can get off of it is 3 cards, so you can draw 3 and lose 3, which is actually pretty good. I would pay 3 mana for a draw 3, lose 3. It's not much better than Read the Bones. I actually think it's worse than Read the Bones, and most of the time it's just going to be a more expensive Sign in Blood, which I do not like. I like Sign in Blood, but I don't like paying more for Sign in Blood. And at its very worst, it's just 3 mana, lose a life, draw a card, and that's quite bad. So I think you can pass up on this quite a bit. I don't think you ever need it. Black doesn't have a lot of card draw outside of uncommons and common or rares, but if you want to play it, go for it. But my recommendation is don't take it. Gruul draws Overseer. Alright, so part of our cycle of rares that care about the land type. This is a 3/4 flyer for 6, so it's quite behind on the flying race. It can do some damage, but with just that, it's not quite there yet. So Landfall. When a land enters, your other creatures get +1/+0. If you played a land to trigger landfall, those creatures get +2/+0. So it's worth noting that she doesn't get her own bonus. It's your other creatures, which can be fine. If your creatures are spread out and you have gone wide for the game, this can be the payoff that you really want in your top end. But she herself is kind of underwhelming. We've already seen a 3-mana spell that gives the same ability here, and also gives first strike to your colorless creatures. I think that's really the way you want to go if you're trying to spread out your damage. I'm not saying this card is unplayable. It's just not very, it's not good. Well, I would say it's good. If I had to use a word to describe it, I would say it's good. But it's passable, it's cuttable, and altogether, it's not the best thing in the world. I should say +2/+0 on all of your creatures for playing a land, though, is quite a bit, so maybe I should reconsider. I'll have to play with it a little bit and see how it works out for me before I have a very strong opinion about it. Alright, and moving to our mythics, both of which are quite insane. Drina is a 3-mana, 2/3 flyer with first strike, so already insane. Good abilities, aggressively costed, and also an ally, so we've got everything we want. Whenever Drina, Liberator of Malkir, deals combat damage to a player, put a 1/1 counter on each attacking creature you control. So this sounds even better than it is, or it is even better than it sounds, because if she manages to damage with first strike, her ability actually triggers before all the non-first strikers deal damage. So if she deals damage, all of your other attacking creatures get +1/+1 before they deal damage, assuming they don't also have first strike. So she can pump your team quite a bit, make your opponent's life very miserable. If they don't have a flyer to block Drina, and Drina just gets in, then all of your other creatures are suddenly that much harder to get rid of. So definitely always first pick. Not very splashable, but definitely worth being in black for it. A huge payoff here. Very aggressive card, and really rewards you for playing smaller creatures and attacking a lot. And finally, we do get our Black Planeswalker, Obnixilis Reignited. So he comes down on turn 5 with 5 loyalty, which is a lot. And he has 2 immediate abilities. Most often, you'll probably see the -3, destroy target creature. If this guy comes down and your opponent only has 1 creature, then that creature's gone, and Obnixilis just gets to kind of dominate from there. And in very least, 5-mana removal spell is still playable. So if that's all you get out of him is destroying your opponent's best creature, then it seems fair. The +1 is quite good. You draw a card and you lose 1 life. 1 life is fair for 1 card per turn. Ideally, assuming you can't just go crazy with Reignited with Obnixilis, you can -3 to destroy something, +1 the following turn, -3 again. And then you've basically paid 5 mana to kill 2 creatures and draw a card, which is awesome. The emblem will pretty much win you the game in just a couple of turns. Target opponent gets an emblem with whenever a player draws a card, you lose 2 life. Notice that says whenever a player draws a card, not whenever you draw a card. So if your opponent has that emblem and you draw for your turn, they lose 2 life. Then they lose 2 life. When they draw, every turn they're losing 2 life. And then if Obnixilis is somehow still alive, every trigger here loses them 2 life. So even though the -8 isn't going to happen very often, these first 2 abilities are very good. And Planeswalkers that can come down and have an immediate impact on the board, the way the -3 does, are very good. If all you get out of it is a +1, then it hasn't quite justified it. So I recommend wait until a board state where you can definitely get your advantage out of this card. Don't just run it out +1 and then let it die. Wait till you can -3 it, have it be safe, and then start plussing. But both of these black mythics, first pickable, compared to some of the other mythics we've seen, quite a bit better. But I'd be happy with either of them. Very, very happy. So yeah, there's black for you. Black has a very good curve. Very aggressively costed cards and good attackers. It also has quite good removal. I'm leaning towards white having the better removal, but black has Bone Splinters at the common, and Bone Splinters is no joke. So there you go. Also, I would like to just petition to start giving Planeswalkers flying. Feel like Obnixilis should not be able to be hit by Eldrazi Scions. But anyway, little gripe there. Thank you guys for watching. In the comments below, just let me know what you think of these cards. If you feel like I've underestimated or overestimated certain cards, then let me know. I'm open to other opinions, and I'd like to hear what you think. So stay tuned. We will have more review of this set coming up tomorrow or whenever I upload it.